Now, the US State Department has posted on X, slamming Britain's management of immigration, blaming our inability to control it on the grooming/rape gang crisis. Well, earlier this year, Elon Musk persistently played pressure on X and played a key role in establishing the new grooming gangs inquiry. Well, Donald Trump has told the Prime Minister to use the Navy in the English Channel and said he must drill, baby, drill, baby, drill, there you go, in the North Sea. But is it time the United States butted out of British politics? We're now joined by the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, and the editor of Turn Left, Ben Mclaine. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me this evening. Ben, I'll start with you. This is quite an unprecedented intervention by the State Department. They've put out a tweet. In that tweet, of course, they point not just to Britain, but to the whole of the EU's immigration woes. But they also point out Pakistani rape gangs in this tweet, as you can see it on your screen here. Ben, what do you make of this? Do you think the Americans should butt out?
Yeah, I think this is the dying throes of a administration that knows it's pretty doomed once the Epstein files are released. I think that's largely what it comes down to. But you've got to bear in mind for this whole thing that collated Ministry of Justice and ONS data shows that white men make up 89% of CSA convictions, while being like 82% of the population, and Asian men, who are supposedly like the grooming gang, sort of like they're represented as the image of the grooming gang phenomenon, if you like. They make up 6% of CSA convictions, while being 9% of the total population. So Asian men are actually underrepresented. That's what the statistics show us.
Well, Ben, just briefly on that, just because we've got to be careful. I just don't want to mislead, because we do try to separate CSA specifically and rape gangs, because obviously, as far as we're aware, rape gangs, there's a massive overrepresentation of Pakistani ethnic heritage people in that proportion of rape gangs. But however,
that's not what the data shows. But that
well, you can disagree with me on that one. That's fine.
No, because a lot of this misinformation comes from.
Let's focus on. Yeah, okay. Well, look, I don't want to get into that, but let's focus on the US. Do you think the United States should be getting involved in British politics?
Oh no, I think it is purely a distraction from the Epstein files. I do have to ask as well. Of course, if these files are released and it turns out that Donald Trump is involved in them. The tweet thread that we started with said that the U.S. embassies will document crimes and human rights abuses committed by those of a migrant background. Now, if Trump is in the Epstein files, will the embassies document those crimes committed by Trump, because he fits that description, right? He would be a man of a migrant background because he's Scottish family, moved to the U.S., committing serious sex crimes, if that's the case, right? Okay, just a question for you.
Okay, yeah, great. Greg, I'll pass that straight over to you.
Yeah, that's pretty out there, that whole argument. I think the Epstein files, believe me, if there was anything negative about President Trump in the Epstein files, the Democrats would have released it in October of 2024 during the election. They controlled Washington for 4 years prior to the president winning the election and had the Epstein files. So there's a lot more downside.
Unless the Clintons are still are in it as well, in which case they might not want to, right?
There's a lot more downside for Democrats. All of the donations from Jeffrey Epstein were to Democrats. And so I think there's a lot of potential downside, but we'll see. We might be disappointed. There might not be much news in there. So it might be a great nothing burger, but we'll see. But in terms of this issue, look, it's not new. I mean, the J.D. Vance and others have been critical of the UK for quite some time now, and going back to the Munich conference last spring. So this isn't a distraction about Epstein or anything else. This is just America looks at our closest ally and wants the best for this country. And I think it's also reading the room. I mean, it's a top issue for voters or for citizens in the UK. And I know that the US wants what's best for the UK, A, because of that relationship, and B, it's also important for the US to have, the West, our allies in Europe, have national borders that are paid attention to. And look, and this isn't, virtue signaling. This is dead serious. The president ran on, he read the room as well. He ran on this issue among a few others. And that's one of the reasons he was elected. And he's done a great job managing the border at this point. And that can be done in the UK. So he wants what's best for the UK. I think the entire administration does. And again, it's not virtue signaling, because only 4 years ago, we were in the same boat. You know, we had open borders and a real crisis in this country. So the UK is just where the US was in 2021.
Okay, Ben, I'll pass it back over to you.
It is virtue signaling, though, isn't it? Because for one thing, you say we've got this special relationship, but you're still imposing tariffs on us. That's the position of America right now. Still imposing tariffs on the UK. All right, they're less than the European Union, but still imposing tariffs on us. And also on Question Time in March this year, you yourself defended Trump's relationship with Andrew Tate. So do you think that Andrew Tate is one of the good immigrants who allegedly commit sex crimes, or does it only apply to immigrants from Asia and Africa?
Yeah, no, I didn't defend that at all. In fact, I have never heard of Andrew Tate.
You did. There's footage.
When that question was asked, what I was saying is that the president notably talks to anybody. He just had a communist at the White House on Friday.
What, so even people who allegedly committed human trafficking? The president immigrants who allegedly committed human trafficking.
President is willing to talk to anybody. And speaking of human trafficking, you know, the Democrats did a great job of ignoring the sex trafficking and human trafficking that occurred on our border with Mexico for 4 years. So, look, I think it's important. It's an important issue, obviously, and that's why the president has addressed it rather aggressively.
Ben, what do you make of that?
Okay. What do you think the motivation would be for the Democrats to ignore that, or do you think that's just a useful lie to tell voters so that they avoid looking at the relationship between Donald Trump,
if I may interject,
Andrew Tate?
Ben, if I may interject as the host of this debate, try and answer some of Greg's questions. He's trying to answer yours. You've got to answer some of his. Go on.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, if you want to put it back.
I can tell you why the Democrats ignored the sex trafficking at the border. It's because they wanted more Democrat voters, and they wanted to increase the census, the registration of voters in states where they can have more delegates and more congressmen. So, you know, that's pretty straightforward. But I do think
through asylum policy.
Whether you asked me, you know, why the Democrats ignored it, and I'm telling you why. So, and maybe there was other reasons for them to ignore the border, but that's what they did. And so for 4 years, we had 2 million illegal migrants crossing the border, including undocumented children and unescorted children. So it's really a crime what happened. And we of course, the president sees that happening in other countries and wants to do something about it.
Yeah. So of course, there were children crossing the border, including children like quite closely involved with Matt Gaetz, who, of course, Donald Trump appointed into a fairly high position, right?
Well, Ben, listen, I mean, if we're talking, listen, I'm just going to interject, Greg, if you don't mind, because Ben, look, if we're going to constantly criticise Donald Trump for people he's met, we should also look at people on the left who have met people. Jeremy Corbyn's met some very nasty people, in my opinion, IRA terrorists, in my opinion.
Sure. How many of them were appointed to his cabinet?
Well, that's not necessarily the point you made about Andrew Tate. So if we're going to take the same thing all in all, Andrew Tate's not a member of the American cabinet, and Trump has met him, but Jeremy Corbyn and others have met him. Can we really hold people accountable for people they've met in passing, particularly quite famous and well-known people who all gravitate in similar circles? Can we really hold them accountable for that?
Well, we can hold them accountable when they give them sanctuary from prosecution, which is what's happened with Andrew Tate, right? He is. He has several accusations of sex crimes committed in other countries. And look, I thought we were against sex crimes committed by immigrants. I thought that was the position we were all agreeing on here. But apparently it's fine when it's some immigrants.
OK. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Thank you very much for joining for our hearty debate this evening, Greg and Ben. Thank you very much. We'll do it again soon, I promise.